Hmm.
Hi there. How are you?
Good. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. And I apologize. Over the weekend, I started to lose my voice a little bit. So not the best thing for me who's talking all the time, but hopefully it's not a distraction for you.
Oh, you sound fine.
Oh, well, thank you.
You sound good.
Great.
Um, so where are you?
I'm in Arizona.
Okay,
And where are you?
great. Houston.
Houston. Okay. I haven't been to Houston, but my sister used to live in Austin and it was beautiful.
Yeah, Austin is beautiful.
Hmm. Yes. Is it very humid in Houston?
Yeah, this is when we all kind of just go, oh no, because it's already in the 90s and humid.
See, that's the thing. We're so used to a dry heat here. It is hard for me to do the humidity. Whenever I go anywhere with humidity, I'm like, oh my goodness. So, but I'm sure it's just like anything, you get used to it, right?
Sort of. I mean, that's why Texans go to Colorado or something. We
Hmm.
just we just go north or
That was
or
a
up
very
in the
honest
mountains.
answer, sort of. I love it.
Yes, yes. Um, well, great. So you have 7 kids?
Yes.
Okay, this is great. So I've been a family therapist for a lot of years, like 35, 30, I don't know how many years, a bunch of years.
Long time. Yes.
And so anyway, I just think we'll have a great discussion,
Yeah.
of what you see and what I've seen and
I love it. Are you still do you do one-on-one clients still?
I do.
Wow. So, what age group do you work with most often?
Uh, well, my audience is really tweens, teens, young adults.
Hmm.
So, but my 2 books are for moms of tweens, teens, and young adults. One's called Dial Down the Drama. The other's Dial Up the Dream. Dial
Hmm.
Up the Dream is from 18 to 25. So, but I see a lot of college students still, and high
Hmm.
school students. And,
Yeah.
and I'll have the parents who come in, and I'll bring this up. Like their 11-year-old boy was just diagnosed with ADD. Or actually, we know it's ADHD,
Right.
but so I think we could just have fun talking about that. And oh my goodness, you've like lived it. So um,
Yeah, so hopefully too much of the crazy doesn't come out, right? I know, but yeah, I think it'll be a fun discussion for sure.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah.
Um, do you have any questions for me?
No, but as you were talking, I was thinking, I almost wish I was interviewing you. I have like all these questions to get to know you. So I know that's not what it's about, but you'll have to tell me more later because that's a long time. Um, I know you know this more than I do, but I feel like you think you know a lot enough, but your clients really teach you, right? So
Hmm.
that's a long time to be working with so many different individuals. I'm sure you're just a wealth of knowledge that the experience is just, it can't be replaced. So,
It's true. I know, like Brene Brown would always talk about qualitative research. I mean, that's basically what I've had,
right. Yeah,
and
I
you've
know.
had.
Well, no, not for that long. That's what I mean. I feel confident in what I do, but to say that you've been doing this for 30 plus years, that's a long time.
It
And
is.
that's great. That's great. I really, and we can talk about this in the interview, but I just feel like we're not doing a good enough job in the mental health field for that age, for this age group, for the teens and the young adults. So we need people out there who are really able to help them. And that's really a part of my story was not being able to find help that really helped them.
Well, great. Well, I'm
Okay,
excited. So, all
me
right.
too.
So I always want to check, even when I think it's obvious, um, how to say your name. So is
Oh,
it's Jheri South, right?
It's difficult to say. It's Jheri.
Okay.
So, so think of, I don't know why my parents did this to me. So think of like Zsa, but
Okay.
most people can't say it. So it's okay. Like anything
Sherry.
that comes out is fine. Yes, Jheri.
Sherry. Okay. Well, see,
It's not
that's
easy. Most people do say Jerry, just so you know. So I will answer to that.
well, that is why I always check it out because you never know.
Especially
All right.
with my name. Yes. Yeah.
Um, so I will do the intro later.
Okay.
Um, but it looks like I will definitely include your ADHD quiz.
Okay. That's great.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
got you, girl. I got you.
I I love it. Perfect. Thank you.
All right. So we'll just jump in.
Okay.
Okay. Oops. Got some spam call. Hold on. Okay, there you are. All right. All right. So welcome, Jheri South.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here today.
I know we're going to have such a great conversation. I know that. So
Mhm.
the first question I ask all my guests is, are you a mom? And if so, what are the ages of your kids?
Yes, this is going to be a little bit of a long answer. I am a mother and I have 7 children. So my oldest is 29 and she's married. And then I have a son who's almost 22, another son who's almost 21, a daughter who's 19, a son who's 17, a daughter who's 15. And then I have a son who just turned 8. I know. It's okay if you laugh. It feels a little nutty sometimes. And 6 of them still live at home. So
Wow.
a house full over
Wow.
here.
So the good thing about this age range is every mom who is listening probably has a kid about your age, someone that you're parenting. So they can all relate to you. So that's
Every age
good.
over here. That's right.
Every possible age,
Yes.
from the preteens up to, 29.
Yes. And it doesn't actually get easier just because your kids get older, right? It's a whole
Oh
nother
my
ball
gosh, I do
game.
know that. My daughter's 29, so I do know that.
Hmm.
Um, so many things we could talk about, but we are going to really kind of focus on ADHD today. But before we kind of get into that, I know you're interested in that. You're an ADHD coach. Uh, but just tell us a little bit about your story and why you're interested in that.
Sure. So I'll try to sum this up because there's a lot there. I was a single mother of 6 children for a long time, and I did not know that I had ADHD. I wasn't diagnosed until I was in my 40s. But it was interesting that my children were all honestly they were pretty easy when they were younger. They didn't write on walls. They didn't empty out cupboards. I remember people saying things like, "You have 6 kids," and I'm not kidding. I remember thinking, "What? Like it's hard." And then preteen and teenage years hit, and it was like one after another. Most of my kids were pretty close together, were really struggling. And so there's a lot there that I could go into, but really I think the highlight of the story as to why I do ADHD coaching and why I work with teenagers and young adults is because I had set out, I'd left my career to be a coach because I wanted to help other single mothers and help them reinvent themselves in business and career. That was really kind of my strength. And my son was really struggling at the time. I believe he was about 14. And I took him everywhere to get help, and nothing was helping him. He ended up in a behavioral health facility. He attempted suicide. And I really had gotten to the point that I believed I'm probably going to lose my son. And I
Mm.
did a pilot program for teens at the request of the women I was working with. I didn't really want to, if I'm being honest. I had said, no, I do not want to work with teenagers. My son hates me. He's so difficult. But I did it, and it was a 4-week program. I think I had 10 to 15 teens in that first program. And it was the first thing that helped my son. And I was shocked because he didn't care for me much at the time. I knew that it was transformational, what I was doing with the women. I didn't realize the impact it would have on him. So I immediately shifted my niche. My children started being diagnosed with different things, mostly so 6 of my 7 children have ADHD. 4 of them right now have been diagnosed as being on the spectrum. We suspect a fifth one is on the spectrum as well. And being diagnosed myself and a lot of my siblings, I started to go down this, rabbit hole in ADHD. I reached out to some of the top specialists. I started interviewing them in their homes. I just was on a mission to learn everything I could. And that's when I realized that some of the traditional things I had been doing with my son, why they weren't working, because he needed special training for his neurodivergence. It was one of the main things that was causing him to feel as though something was wrong with him. And, once he started to understand his brain and his capabilities, that really made all the difference.
Mm, wow. So I'm curious, like, what was it in that pilot program that really helped your son?
Well, I think just the training of my experience with my son was a couple of things. I mean, he's a teenage boy, so he had a hard time connecting with adults in general. He felt very misunderstood. He had some anger issues. And he wasn't getting real tools that he, as a teenager, could implement right away. So in my coaching program, with that age, I seem to be able to connect with that age pretty well. I was able to break things into pieces for them so that they could actually write out. Think of it as almost a little bit like CBT, but they had a very specific formula and graph that they could write out for themselves. They could work in groups, they could do it individually, and they started to see how much power they had to change things right in that moment. And by things, I mean their experiences. Most people think they need their circumstances to change. They don't realize how much power they have to just change themselves. So I think it was the way that we broke it down for them. Because it was this program, that they were coming back, and there were other teenagers there. One thing that I thought was really interesting, and you probably have noticed this as well, but when you get teens together, they tend to isolate a little bit. They're looking around. They don't want to talk to anyone else if they're there and they don't know anything about the other people that are there. And they just assume that their life is not understood to anybody else. What they're going through is unique and nobody else understands them. We're different. And by just the end of the first day, they were able to understand, even though we are all so different, we're all experiencing the same emotions. I think that was very helpful and eventually
Yeah.
healing for them. Yeah, so there was a
Hmm.
lot there, but I think it was the way that we broke it down, having a model for them to be able to do at home and in the program, so that when they graduated and left, I would get little text messages from them like, I'm sitting in my math class and I just hate my teacher and I just, I want to do this thing or that thing. I just got out a piece of paper. I did the model. It made me feel so much better and I was able to finish my test. Something like that is a big deal that they have the tools to be able to do it.
Yeah, that's great.
Hmm.
So let's say some parents come in and they have 11-year-old who was just diagnosed with ADHD, and they
Hmm.
said, like, what should we do differently as parents?
Well, I think this is a good question because I started to notice almost immediately when I was working with teens, you knew the difference between the parents who wanted to be involved in the process and those that had more of the mindset of my child has gone crazy, they're struggling, fix them. And there was always so much more progress when the parents asked, can I come in for a session too? Can I learn how to be a better parent? So there's humility that has to be involved. Even the most well-intended parents usually can learn how to communicate better. Children with ADHD are generally misunderstood. They're labeled as being lazy, unwilling, just having a bad attitude, being disrespectful. But when we understand that ADHDers tend to lie more often, mostly because of self-preservation or anxiety over not completely understanding what would be an appropriate or correct answer to keep someone from being disappointed in them. They're usually struggling with extreme emotional dysregulation. So they struggle with the way that they see themselves. And when that's constant in their lives, there's going to be a lot more irritability. There's going to be a lot more impatience and lashing out. So parents who can understand how to talk to their children differently, to show patience for what their child is going through. We know that behavior is communication. So when their child is acting out, it's usually because their child does not know how to regulate themselves, how to communicate, and they're not keeping up with societal standards typically.
Mhm. Great point. Yeah, there is a huge difference, like you said, the humility of a parent that just says, "I need help. How do I do this?"
Hmm.
Versus just being mad at your kid.
Hmm.
I've seen
Right.
a lot of just parents just kind of label their kid, mad at their kid, frustrated at their kid, yelling at their kid, um, but not understanding them.
And I will say I have a great deal of compassion for parents who might feel that way because sometimes kids with ADHD can be difficult. I have kids that I see that are in fourth grade and they've already been kicked out of two schools, and they go to school and they lie and they say things are happening at home that aren't happening. And as a parent, that is frustrating, but still the answer is the same. I usually tell parents, if your child is struggling, start with you. That has never not been the best answer. Start with you.
Yeah.
How are you thinking about them? Because that manifests into the way that you treat them. What are the processes at home? Most of us, I'm not parents who don't have kids with ADHD. Most of us don't have very good processes at home. It's difficult to be consistent when we have, a family or a job, just life's demands. And children with ADHD need that. They need that kind of consistency. They need to know what to expect. They need to know that their parents aren't going to yell at them and lose their patience with them because of their behavior.
Mhm.
So I think that that is where we need to start. We can do all the work in the world with these kids, but if they're being easily frustrated at home and having a difficult time managing their emotions at home, it will not we won't be very successful.
Yeah, I could ask you five different categories of questions, but I'm going to go back to, all right, so you're the mom of these six kids that basically have ADHD plus.
Mhm, mhm.
Um, so that's a lot of people forgetting things and forgetting assignments and, oh, I didn't know I was supposed to do that. And like, OMG, like that, like, how did you
Chaos.
chaos? Yes. And
Mhm,
they are probably doing the best they can at that point. So, how did you take care of yourself in that? Because that's a lot. It's a lot if you have one. My daughter had ADHD, and that's one, and that was a lot. So,
mhm.
six. How did you take care of yourself?
Well, and there's this whole other category probably don't have time to get into, but then when you're a parent with ADHD who has children with ADHD, right? I mean, it's totally chaotic. And my whole life started to make so much more sense once I was diagnosed in my basically I was 40. I don't know. I would always joke with people like I don't do any one thing really well. I just do a whole bunch of things mediocre because you just feel that way. It's like always putting out fires. I was never the most organized person. I think when I would get a compliment from people, it would be, wow, how do you do so many things? How do you get so many things done? And if I was criticized by people, it would be, how come you're always late? Or how come you can't ever like stay on top of your calendar? And I was like, I don't know. This is just who I am, right? I'm just, my excuse was always, I've just got so much going on. I don't know. It almost feels like a blur. We just somehow made it work. This is one thing I love about ADHDers is there are a lot of gifts there. There's a lot of
Mhm.
creativity and the ability to multitask and do a lot of things. at one time, but somebody who's really good at being organized and on top of things would not look at my life and think I'm doing things very well. But when we all have ADHD, it really works for us. And so the important things were getting taken care of. And that's the thing. I mean, you look at like, what's your priority? My priority was never being incredibly organized. That's so boring for me. I just like made things work. So I'm like, it just worked. We were having fun. That's probably not the answer you were looking for, but I didn't have a system back then. I don't know. It just worked.
Okay, well, no, I love your answer actually. Yeah, I am sure that I definitely have some ADHD myself. So, I mean, big surprise, right?
Well, they do say it's genetics, so.
But yeah, yeah, I think, and what you just said is in terms of what your priority is. If you wanted to have a tight ship, you probably would have been frustrated. But you had different expectations, and I think if a parent has an expectation that's pretty high, rigid kind of standards, that's going to be really frustrating. If
Mhm.
it's kind of like always appreciated my daughter's energy, her spunk, her fun, her spontaneousness. Um, it wasn't a very clean room, but now she's like so clean and she thinks I'm a slob. So I don't understand that.
Now she's judging you.
Now
You're
she's
the
judging
slob.
me. Yes, yes.
Well,
Um,
and I just wanted to add in there real quick. This is more of a single mother thing than it is an ADHD thing. But I will say I had quite a mind shift. When I was married before I got divorced, when I had 6 children, I did definitely handle things better. I had a husband who was very involved. He was a wonderful husband. And so I did have these priorities. My kids were in lots of activities and they had their chores and we followed a pretty decent schedule. I was never very rigid, but things worked very well. Like I said, my kids were pretty easy when they were young. When I got divorced, there is a mind shift that the things that were very important to me when I was married, like things that are important, but looking back, they weren't near as important as I made them, like how many extracurricular activities my kids were doing, and that they were wearing, dressed just the way I wanted them to before school, just things like that. When I was a single mother of 6 children, my mind shift changed quite a bit, and my priority was to make sure that my kids were functioning and thriving. I was working a lot, that we were having fun together on the weekends. And so I would say almost everything that I was really focused on before, not everything, but a lot of things, just the way things ran, completely changed when I was a single mom. And so it was a lot more chaotic, but I would definitely just let the laundry not be folded and take my kids out on a Saturday afternoon. And they weren't in near as many activities, but I focused on really trying to give as much as my undivided attention as possible. Things that I cared about before, but I can just say that with a mind shift like that, it's like I didn't care how it looked to anybody else. I didn't care if things were organized or going a certain way. I just cared that my kids knew that I loved them. And it did look very chaotic, but that's what was important. It was a survival at that time. So there wasn't a lot of organization. I just want to put that out there because I wasn't prepared for how much of a mind shift I had. This is a really silly thing, but I just thought my daughter could have gone to dance in New York. And I thought, I will make sure that she's always able to dance, whatever I have to do. When I was a single mother, it just didn't matter anymore. Like things like that. It's
mhm.
interesting how when you're in those situations, you have such a mind shift about what's important.
Yeah, yeah. No, I love everything you're saying. And I think if you're single or married and you have kids who have ADHD, they will frustrate you at some point.
Yes. The same way I frustrate my husband, Colleen, but yes, this is true.
Yes, they will definitely frustrate you.
Yes.
And but just like you, what my priority was maintaining relationship
Mm.
and connection and making sure that frustration didn't lead the relationship, but play, fun, love, caring led in the relationship. And I think sometimes you have to be really intentional about that Because
Yeah.
in your mind, you're like, OMG, you lost your driver's license again, or you didn't get this done again, and this affected your grades. So those things can be pretty large in your mind, because
Mhm.
like your grade point average, what are you doing? How could you have not turned that in?
Mhm.
Um, and so that was my priority, is to maintain that connection and relationship
Oh,
for
yeah.
her.
Right. Well, I think that's so important. We know that kids with ADHD by the age of 10, they've heard over 20,000 corrective messages. Um, the kids that come to me with ADHD, the thing I start working on first is their self-confidence. Most kids with ADHD and even adults, I would argue, struggle with a fractured self-esteem because they are used to being compared. Your brother can do it, why can't you do it? What's so hard about this? Why can't you get it done? What happened? And even that word again, like, how come this happened again? And there's a lot of masking going on, especially for girls, trying to pretend that they are neurotypical when they are in fact not. So I think that parents, you're asking earlier, like, what can parents do? It's really understand the struggle. It's surprising to me how many people still don't accept an ADHD diagnosis as being real. Or if they do, it doesn't surprise me because there's so much misinformation out there that they don't fully understand ADHD, because we see what's going on out here, but we can't see what's going on in here. And that's
Hmm.
where the real impairment is. And that's what's usually being masked.
Yeah, for sure. I remember actually decades ago being at a Texas Marriage and Family Therapy conference, and this simple little illustration, I've never forgotten it, which was 10 people got up in the front of the room and they said, "This is what it looks like if you don't have ADHD." And they had one basketball and they threw the basketball to person to person to person all around the circle. And they said, "This is what it looks like if you have ADHD." It was the same circle, same people, but there were 10 basketballs and they all threw them up in the air at the same time.
Yes, that's actually that's a good visual. I would agree with that. That was good. Whoever came
Yes.
up with that, that was good. For people to understand, if you don't have ADHD, I can understand why someone with ADHD would look lazy or unwilling, constantly unmotivated. You know, you see so many people with ADHD who are diagnosed with depression and anxiety, and many times, really, if the ADHD is treated properly, the anxiety and depression will go away, and that comes from
Mhm.
years of the ADHD not being treated, of trying to please the people around you, of masking and just really doing twice the amount of work for half the reward. They're just barely keeping up, they're struggling in school, or they're struggling to focus. And this is the reason that girls, the diagnosis is missed more often with girls, because they tend to not be hyperactive, but they still have hyperarousal. That's why they
Mhm.
now use the term ADHD instead of ADD, because you're either hyperactive or you experience hyperarousal. So it could be problems with sleep or just overthinking, but there's, for girls especially, there's usually kind of a personality, if you will, that develops of being a people pleaser, doing a lot of masking, willing to, like I said earlier, do twice the amount of work for half the reward. But we want people to be proud of us. We want to meet the criteria or not experience disappointment or have anyone disappointed in us. That's exhausting after a while. And so this is the reason I think that so many people with ADHD are misunderstood, because um, the difference between being lazy and being in a paralysis and not being able to get your brain to engage are two completely different things, but it looks the same from the outside.
Mhm. Well said. So, what does ADHD look like in adults?
Oh, so this is an interesting question, because many adults will believe that they've grown out of ADHD. And I believe it's because the DSM, the behaviors only go up to age 16. So we still do not have adult ADHD criteria. So it's not true that you'll grow out of ADHD, but it is true that you might grow out of the childhood symptoms. So if you're somebody who was uh, more hyper as a child or couldn't sit still or always had to be doing things, that could manifest as an adult as being someone who's overwhelmed or constantly has to be busy, doesn't know how to just sit and relax, and enjoy peaceful moments. So these childhood symptoms will manifest into adult symptoms. I like to think of ADHD as being similar to autism in that it's more like a spectrum. It doesn't look like any one thing, because you will have people who are more hyper. They're always on the go, very productive, actually, working all the time, can't sit still, can't slow down. And you'll have other ADHDers that really aren't on the go, that appear to be lazy, even though that's not what's going on. Um, can't really finish anything. They have lots of things that they start, but it just doesn't keep their interest long enough to keep going. Very forgetful, disorganized, and kind of just a shoulder shrug about things. It's like nothing is really important enough that it's really getting them going. And then everything in between. So it can look like a lot of different things. I would say that, and it was actually, so I highly respect Dr. William Dodson. He's one of my favorite ADHD doctors. He's probably the top medication ADHD specialist in the United States. But he was quoting someone, and it slipped my mind. But anyways, he said that this person had said, if I could go back and I could narrow ADHD down, I would define it as two main things: distractibility and emotional dysregulation. That's where most of the impairment is. And I bring that up because when people think of ADHD, they usually think of not being able to focus, easily distracted, can't follow through and get things done. But less often they think of the emotional dysregulation piece, which for many of my clients is one of the only impairing symptoms. In fact,
Mm.
1/3 of all adults today say that rejection sensitivity dysphoria, or RSD, is the most impairing symptom that they deal with ADHD.
Mm. Mm. That's interesting. Very
Hmm.
interesting.
Right.
So, what are your thoughts about, like, for the parents listening, thinking about their kids or for themselves about medication?
And this is an interesting question, because if you would have asked me this question even 5 years ago, I would have given you a very different answer. I've always been pretty anti-medication my entire life. I like to do things natural. I have an integrative medicine doctor. But of course, I've changed the way that I feel about this over time. Uh, there are just some, well, let me focus on kids. There are just some kids who cannot function without it. I've been doing this long enough that I will have kids come in here who are being kicked out of school, who are just completely out of control. So when we think about the emotional dysregulation piece of ADHD, what are we talking about? We're talking about, when you have ADHD, it's like when you're up, you're up, but when you're down, you're down. And this is happening all day, up, down, up, down. So that on its own creates a lot of irritability, because there's so much energy output to emotional dysregulation. But then also there's the sensitivity, the rejection sensitivity, and impulsivity. So some children just cannot control their impulses, no matter how much behavioral coaching we do, no matter how many times we talk about this. They can sit in here, they can reflect. They usually feel a lot of shame over these episodes that they have at school or at home. But in the moment, they'll explain, I just see red, or I just can't stop myself. So we can do some good work in here. We can get them maybe even to 80%, but without medication to calm the brain, they just can't function. So some kids, when they get on medication, they start to have friends. There's statistics about some kids by the age of 10 with ADHD. I can't remember exactly the number, but it's quite high, has never been invited to a birthday party. I have kids in elementary school with ADHD that are taking chips and money to school, trying to bribe kids to play with them. It's very painful for them. And then when they get on medication, it calms their brain. They're able to, they are more aware a little bit, of the space they have between them and their peers. They're able to control themselves when somebody makes fun of them on the basketball court, and their life changes. And they'll say things like, oh, I didn't know it could feel this way. This feels so good. They have control. And then, other kids, if they do some good work, I believe in, whether it's therapy or it's coaching, I believe in help for kids, whether they're on medication or not, especially if they're neurodivergent. Medication is not something I'm scared of anymore. And I used to be. I used to believe that stimulant medication and addiction runs in my family. It's the reason I'm divorced, as my ex-husband um, became addicted to some pretty hard substances and has never been able to get clean. And my children have struggled with some of the same things to some degree. And so that has always been a concern of mine, but I no longer have those concerns. When you have ADHD, I take ADHD medication from time to time. I don't feel anything when I'm on it. I don't feel euphoric. I don't feel hyper. You shouldn't feel anything. The reason I know it's working is because I can reflect on what I got done. And I know I got it done because I took my medication. So if you feel like a zombie, if you feel numb, if you feel like you have headaches, like you've taken too much caffeine, those are all signs that you're over medicated.
Mhm.
It's not addictive unless you don't have ADHD. I think the reason we have a substance abuse problem with stimulants is because it's so easy to get our hands on. It's not very expensive. And so people who do not need to take it will take it and feel some kind of way when they're on it.
Yeah, my daughter, who's very funny, but I mean, literally funny, but she talks about, she goes, I mean, some people want to take this to kind of get all wired up. She goes, it just calms, if I take something, I just calm down.
Exactly. Exactly. We don't know why, and I'm not the medication expert, but I have spent some time with Dr. William Dodson, and so I've learned a few things, and I will not explain it the way that he does, but he explains that there are four molecules in stimulant medication that we take. Three of them do absolutely nothing, and they don't really understand why one of them mirrors the molecule, somewhere in the top of your brain. Your brain, if you have ADHD, is just burning through that molecule much too quickly. And so the stimulant medication will mirror that molecule and kind of fill in the gap and slow things down. And that's why we're able to regulate our emotions and focus and be more calm and not so reactive and impulsive. And this is why, there's different medications and different doses work for different people. The other thing is that the stimulant medication is not based on your age or your height or your weight or your gender. It's just based on your absorption rate. So my niece, who's, 90 pounds soaking wet, takes 3 times more medication than I do. It's based off of absorption. So it's, for some people, it's simple. They get on medication and it works right away. And other people, I think it's a trial and error and it takes quite some time. So I would just say, some of my kids are on medication, some of them are not. Some people don't need it. And some people, especially when we do have kids that are the emotional dysregulation side of ADHD can be so intense that it can look like bipolar disorder. Dr. William
Yeah,
Dodson says that's one of the main things that's misdiagnosed is that they'll get a bipolar diagnosis and it's actually ADHD.
that is so interesting.
Hmm.
Very, very interesting.
I've experienced that with my own children, actually.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Wow. Yeah, because if I think we were talking before we started recording about maybe what's changed, and I think one of the things that's changed is about talking more about the emotional piece with
Yes.
ADHD.
Yes, whenever I'll do a webinar on rejection sensitivity dysphoria, because what, by the way, they believe they're still wrapping up their testing, but they believe that you have to have ADHD to have RSD. And Dr. William Dodson was the first one to ever start writing on it. And RSD, if I do a webinar on that, I just have women coming out of the woodwork. I think I have this. I think I have this. I know that I struggled with it intensely, especially in my 20s, and I didn't have any words for it. I felt a little bit crazy because you're masking, of course, when you're around other people, but you can feel internally that your reaction to what's happening is more intense than probably it should be, but it doesn't change the fact that it's incredibly intense. You don't know what to do with it, and you are hurt. In fact, I would explain it as being, I felt like I was being clawed from the inside out. Nothing would turn it off. It was such a struggle. And so you didn't want people to see. And so you try to keep it inside, and that wasn't incredibly helpful either. But everyone with ADHD, for the most part, is going to struggle with RSD to some degree. But some will struggle with it obviously much more than others. And it is just the perceived rejection of, it could be constructive criticism or feedback that was hard to take. It could be the idea that you've disappointed somebody else or even failed to meet your own expectations, teasing, being called out in public. For many of the kids that I work with, it's just their teacher calling them out in class. We call it an episode because it comes on so quickly, and kids who can't control themselves will lash out and then feel immense shame afterwards for the way that they acted.
Mm,
It's
mm,
intense.
mm. I've seen that a lot with kids and teens and college students.
Mhm.
Yeah. Wow.
And it's important to note that when it comes to an RSD episode, so if you have a child that behaves this way,
Mm-hmm.
there is nothing that you can do to try to get that person out of the episode. It doesn't matter if it's a child or an adult. So a mistake that parents will make is they will try to talk to the child in that moment, de-escalate. They could yell and be upset at the child and escalate even further, but many parents will just be trying to talk the child down. It will not work. That child needs to go be by themselves and think through things. Hopefully, they have some tools to work through their thoughts. They have to get themselves out of the episode. If you're an adult who has RSD, you have to get yourself out of an episode. There is no point in trying to talk through what happened in that moment.
Mhm. So, so for the kid or the teen or the college student, for them to know that they need to take a pause, that they need to go outside, they need to go, just they need space.
They need space. And one of the first things I think is really important, if this sounds like somebody that you know or love, is reading up on RSD. Because when you don't have a name for it. I'm sure you do something similar to this, but I always explain to kids, this is not your personality, this is your wiring. We want to understand our wiring because
Mm-hmm.
otherwise the thought is there, what is wrong with me?
Mm-hmm.
Am I crazy? How come this always happens to me? How come
Mm-hmm.
everybody treats me this way? How come this? How come that? When we understand we have RSD, we can recognize, oh, this is my RSD,
Mm-hmm.
and give yourself permission. It's okay that I feel this way. It's okay that I'm upset about this, but yes, be alone, work through it on your own. The more somebody tries to talk to them, even if it's, are you okay? Is there anything I can do? That's most likely the person that they're also feeling rejected by, even if it's really interesting the way it works, because if a teenager comes home and maybe they're already upset, let's say it's the teenage girl and the crush they like, they're devastated that something happened. If the parent says the wrong thing, now that rejection has also, our mindset or perception has also been put on the parent. So that parent now trying to be the one to calm them down or coddle them will not work, because in their mind, remember, most of the time it's perceived rejection. You don't think that they should even like me, or you don't even care about my feelings. If the parent keeps trying to go in and, yes, I do, and it just makes it worse. They're spiraling. They have to go work it out.
Mm-hmm.
And most parents don't know how to do that, by the way. It's hard.
Right. Right. Right.
We can
That,
do it later. I just want to point out we can have that conversation
yeah, yeah, yeah,
later,
yeah.
but
Yeah.
not in the moment.
Yeah. That's so good. Yeah. I don't talk about RSD and dial down the drama, but it's but if one of you, if the teen or the parent is emotionally dysregulated, it is not the time to try to talk.
No, absolutely not.
Either of you. And I know for a parent it can feel disrespectful that they're not talking, or you want to get your point across, you want to tell them what they've done wrong for 50 years. Well, actually they haven't been alive that long, but you want to tell them everything they've ever done wrong because it's on your mind and you feel like it's your duty. And it's not the time. It's not the time.
They won't hear you. It will make it worse. And just to put some perspective on it, all of my children are different. We have OCD in my family, and then the comorbidity rate is so high. So all my kids just have a little bit of this and a little bit of that, but they all look very different. So I have one daughter with ADHD who excels. She's an honors class. And most of my kids aren't this way, so I'm not, bragging, but she's the one of the seven that is in all honors classes and gets all A's, and school comes very easily to her. So she doesn't look like somebody. She doesn't, you wouldn't guess that she has ADHD. And so I would say RSD is really the only thing that she really struggles with. She can be a little fidgety. Sometimes she has a hard time focusing, but you just wouldn't know. So for her, she knows she has it. I know she has it. And a good example of this is she's on speech and debate. She came in, she had written a speech. We have a great relationship. She's asked me for help several times in the past. And she came in my office and asked for some help to just look it over. And so I politely gave her my feedback. I was in a great mood. I thought I delivered it just fine. And she lost it. She grabs the paper, forget it. You don't even think, whatever she said, oh, whatever. And she slams the door and walks out. She used to slam the door and say, I hate you, mom. She's not allowed to say that anymore. So, we've talked about RSD. She knows what it is. And so she's been able to control herself enough that the things don't come out of her mouth that used to come out. But she did slam the door and walk out. I do not chase her down the hall saying, you don't slam this door, young lady. It just is like for one thing, I'm almost 50. I've been doing this for too long, right? I know she has RSD. That is not, you have to pick and choose your battles. She no longer yells at me the things that she used to. I know her. We have a great relationship. She always comes back out. Sometimes it's 10 minutes later, sometimes it's an hour later. Gives me a big hug and says, I'm so sorry, mom. I hate that I get mad. I'm sorry. If she slams the door and that's it and walks out, this is just me. You have to decide what's good for you. I'm okay with it because her episodes used to be so much bigger and she's in so much pain. I don't see the value in me chasing her down the hall and telling her she can't slam the door. Now, another child of mine who does not struggle in the same way, that might be a different story because they don't usually slam doors. So I do
Mhm.
parent my children differently based on what their individual struggles are.
Yeah. Oh, this is so helpful. It's my daughter. Uh, she, is she's a massage therapist and neuromuscular therapist, and she's studied Ayurvedic medicine, and she's certified in, you know, um, yoga, teaching yoga, and all this stuff. So she got off her Concerta, which is a stimulant, and
Mm-hmm.
she really wanted it to not be on it and do it the natural way. And she ate really well, and she would do yoga, she would do meditation, and she would do weightlifting. And she just had to take it. Like it
Mm-hmm.
just, if she was, and because she wants to continue to take, more programs and get, and study more. And so she just needed it. And, but I do think that, and she's in Colorado and she hikes and does all this stuff. And so I think the physical activity is super, super helpful. I think the meditation and yoga is super, super helpful. And and then and time alone is super, super helpful. And then sometimes you might need a little more.
That's right. I don't, yeah, if the argument is that it's dangerous or it could be addictive, I understand, that concern for sure.
Hmm.
I don't have that concern anymore, but I've done
Hmm.
my research. If it's, that I just don't want to be on something for, the rest of my life. That one, I have a son with type 1 diabetes and he has to be on insulin for the rest of his life. And it just kind of is what it is. There's a lot of things that we could list off. Like, I don't want to have to work. I don't want to have to deal with this person. There's a lot of things in our lives that we may not want to do forever. Taking a pill that helps my brain calm down isn't really high on that priority list of things I just don't want to do forever. That's pretty simple for me. Uh, our brain never gets used to the benefits of the medication. It will get used to the stimulant effect within a couple weeks, and then after that, it's all benefit. So if your brain really, if your quality of life goes up because you take it, if you can sleep better, or if you can focus, or you are better in social situations, for me, it's just that I'm more productive. I've got a lot of things to do. I can drive and handle my relationships and even my emotional regulation just fine. Probably because I've done this for a living for so long without medication. But when I take my medication, I'm on top of what needs to get done and I'm just able to stay focused and see things through. So for me, that's a no-brainer if I want to be able to handle being mom and showing up and then not, ADHD burnout, we didn't really get into that, but that's a real thing, and I do see that I'm burnt out so much faster if I'm not on my medication than if I'm on it. And I don't think it's because of any of the things that people might put out. Like I've had people tell me that, it's equivalent to doing drugs or speed. And I'll tell them, I don't think so. I don't know, but I'm assuming if I did drugs, that I would, be hyper. And I said, but actually when I'm taking medication, it has the opposite effect. I'm calm, but what is a good word for it? It's not just motivated, but I'm able to show up. I can see things through. I'm not in my paralysis. So I
Mm,
think that treatment can look like a lot of different things. I think it can just look like mindset management techniques. I think it could just be medication, but I think optimal, at least my experience, I see a lot of clients. And by the way, many of the parents I work with are anti-medication. I don't ever push it on anybody. If their child is struggling for quite some time, I might just give them some resources or some things to read. But I fully appreciate anyone's, personal experiences and why they want to do the things that they do. But for my own family, optimal treatment has been a combination of both. And the medication looks different for each one of my children as well. And so when you really want to think about, and this is one thing that I think would be helpful for your audience, as someone again whose children were not very difficult, even being a single mom, that was hard, but my children weren't hard. Right about the time that children start to go through puberty, you're going to, even if your child, you think they might have ADHD, I hear a lot, they'll even get feedback from doctors like, and autism as well. I know we're not talking about that, but it's just like, oh, I wouldn't worry about it right now until it becomes a problem. I do not agree with that statement at all,
mm, mm,
because my experience was all what broke loose as soon as hormones started changing and they became teenagers. And I was like I got hit by a truck. And that is when we will see symptoms start to change. We'll see behaviors manifest. They'll go from doing well in school to not doing well in school at all. The especially with girls, estrogen has a huge effect on symptoms and then also medication. So if you suspect, even if you're not willing to put them on medication, I think getting a diagnosis, starting to understand it, and then being prepared for those emotional changes, talk to them about RSD before it becomes a problem. This is so important because by the time it gets to the point that these behaviors are manifesting, there has been so much negative internal dialogue going on. Children, I think the statistic is only 1 out of 10 children, and this is outside of ADHD, will really tell their parents what's going on inside their mind. And even then, it's not usually the entire truth. When you have ADHD, you are constantly, it doesn't matter what age, you are aware. You're looking around the room, you're recognizing what people can do better than you, you're recognizing that you're doing not as well on tests as everybody else, that the people in front of you that sit around you are all getting complimented by the teacher more than you are, or that you are tripping and falling more often, or just like the little things, the spatial awareness or the not being able to keep up. We are hyper aware of those things. People with ADHD have incredible intuition. We'll joke that they have a sixth sense. So there's so much comparison going on that by the time the behaviors have started, they probably already have been struggling with a fragile self-esteem for quite some time. So just putting a name to what they're struggling with is so helpful.
mm. Very, very, very helpful. All right. Well, we have to wind this down. Any last
Yes.
advice for the moms listening?
Gosh, it's so hard to narrow it down because there's just so many different things. I would say, I think that you said that you were willing to share. I put together a free ADHD quiz.
Yeah.
If you're suspecting that your child has ADHD, you might want to look at, of course, getting them a diagnosis, because there's going to come a point, most likely, when school starts to change, that they'll benefit from a 504 or an IEP. And so if you already have that diagnosis, it speeds things along. And also, usually if a child has ADHD, one of the parents is going to have it as well. So looking at what is ADHD actually versus what I thought it was. There are just so many resources and so much help that's out there, even just understanding it. I guess the main takeaway would be that most kids and people, at least initially, who have ADHD look at it as something that's debilitating. We call it a disorder because medically that is what it is because of the executive function deficits. But in fact, we just have a second neurological system that works quite well when we have an understanding of how it works. It can be used as a superpower. I am incredibly grateful for my ADHD, but I didn't feel that way years ago. And it's understanding it. And then it's different for everyone, but learning how to overcome those things that are holding you back so that you really can go out there and do the things that I think you're probably meant to do.
Okay, can you speak 2 more minutes on the superpower of ADHD?
Oh, well, this has been debated quite a bit, but I have done my research and I do believe it's true that overall, people with ADHD tend to have a higher IQ on average, just overall. They're incredibly creative and intuitive. I think that because ADHDers tend to be a little bit more risk takers, they when they get their mind, when they can get their brain engaged, they can hyper focus and do things, twice as fast as the average person. There's just a lot of strengths there. They make incredible entrepreneurs. They're usually without the anxiety. People, they like to talk, they like to engage. They can be very easy to get along with when they're not feeling threatened. And so I think that the reason so much of that is hidden is because the debilitating symptoms are always in the forefront and people are noticing those and they're making comments about them. So when people with ADHD can learn how to manage their brain, in other words, they're going to have these things that are getting in the way of them reaching their potential. So when they can figure out there are ways, that we have ways to get our brain engaged. So what gets a neurotypical brain engaged is completely different than what gets an ADHD brain engaged. So when we're sitting in school, for example, we don't know this. And so we're just looking at all the things we're doing, wrong, even though I don't believe that that's really what's happening. And so we develop this mindset about ourselves. When we can understand the differences and why it hasn't been working in school. I tell ADHDers in my office, when you get out of high school, that's when you are going to soar because you're inventive and creative and talented and you're an out of the box thinker. They can usually find solutions to problems that other people can't even see. So high schoolers and junior high schoolers, they won't recognize this about themselves. They just most teenagers will just kind of evaluate themselves based off of their grades. That's a terrible idea for ADHDers. We tend to not usually do very well in school. So just understanding their brain increases their self-confidence. And then having like the best school for Montessori is the best school is like a Montessori school where they can walk around and they can touch things. So when ADHDers understand that about themselves, then they feel again the desire to go out there and take the risks that they naturally want to take, put themselves out there. And once they see their potential, quite literally, I believe the ADHDers can do anything they put their minds to.
Love it. Love it. All right. So, if people want to contact you, how can they contact you?
Yeah, you can go to my website, which is where all of my free resources are, like the ADHD test and a free webinar for RSD, and that's jherisouth.com. And that's probably the easiest way if somebody wanted to reach out to me or send me an email or something like that, they could reach me there.
Okay. That's awesome. Well, this has been really, really helpful. Thank you so much for your time.
Yes, thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun. I appreciate being here.
Yes, yes. Very
Great.
fun. Very
Yes.
fun.
Yeah, thank you for having me and letting me talk about ADHD. This has been great.
Yeah, I've loved it. Loved
Yeah.
it.
All right.
Very
Well,
helpful. You have an amazing day.
yes, you too. I appreciate it. And if you ever need anything in the future, if there's anything I can do to help you, please let me know.
Okay, I will.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Have a good one. Thanks,
Okay,
Colleen.
okay, bye-bye.
Okay, bye.